I'm always jealous of your hair, Jim. Happy Wednesday.
I'm jealous of Barcelona, man. It looks like the sun's sneaking in the door there. There's only darkness.
Oh, no. This is actually, it's pretty ingenious because this is like an inside room. So it looks like, but it's just a bright light.
Right.
It's the same darkness. We're an hour ahead. This whole like time change here, but not in US, just completely thrown me off. I don't know.
You're out of step. You're out of step.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it is what it is. Just a crazy ass week. I don't know if you've seen, we're pumping. Started like, oh, let's do a webinar for health coaches. Next thing you know, we're putting on like a global health and well-being coaching symposium with speakers, and we're not even an event company, right? Like,
right.
So it's been a crazy thing, but it is what it is. I'm definitely ready for a drink. That's for sure.
So I was thinking tonight. I don't usually. I'm kind of joining you here tonight. I got a Chardonnay.
Oh, okay. So this Francesca turned me on to this.
What is this?
Some vermouth.
Very Francesca.
I'm gonna get this, but so it's interesting. I'm actually I think I might have mentioned it on there. I saw something just DaMassa and our friend Bolty Boy. They talked about like in the book club. So I got this on healthcare. I think I talked about it last time. So I just picked it up, and not maybe the last time, but a few. I just picked up Hyman Taneja, Stephen Klasko from Jefferson. And I started reading it like a few days back. It was by my nightstand. And then next thing I see, there's a new Spock formed by, these guys. And the Spock is formed exactly by Hemant, but also Glen Tullman and Jen Schneider.
I just saw that today. That came out, 500 million raised, kind of a who's who, to do digital health acquisitions. Amazing.
I know it's absolutely amazing. And, I'm hoping that in the next few episodes, we're going to have somebody who can actually tell us what this vehicle is. So.
Right. This whole SPAC thing is really making the rounds. It's definitely got my mind turned.
I thought, like, when I first heard the term, I thought it was like Spock from.
Yeah. But it's amazing how it's such, reputable top people like Glen Tullman and this, the other group. And I think one of the presidents from Livongo, and
that's right.
You're getting involved, and big firms are backing them. Serious money is going in. And is this the first? I think this is the first digital health. I'm sure it'll be on Bolty Boys and Jess's.
They've already discussed it, so I'm kind of copying them a little bit. There's a few others, but again, we'll actually let them do best what they do. The next guest, I know you haven't met him, and I met him years ago at XMed, the exponential medicine event. This was the good old days of traveling. Okay. And it's funny because I'm just looking up like his bio, because I don't think I've ever read it, but I think I'm going to have to read this one. So hold on one second. I'm just, I love the bio they put together.
Give me a pronunciation of his name.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, you know what? Let's save it. Let's let him in, and let's save it, and then and it's going to be Gautam Gulati who's going to join us. So
excellent.
There he's coming on. I hope with video and a drink.
I hope he has that scarf.
Yeah, hey guys, I can't hear you if you guys are talking.
Yes, we are.
We are talking. Can you hear us now?
I can't hear your audio.
That's weird.
We're hearing each other.
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry, must be you.
Yep.
Wow, this is the first time this happened. Season 3.
Log in. Why don't you? I'll tic-tac with him. Why don't you read his bio? Yeah.
So I will. All right.
Hey, you know what? Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
We can hear you.
I can hear you guys now. This little sucker is not working for some reason.
So
this is why you need like a big sucker like me. you know, like.
Well, I was trying to get you guys some good sound. This thing works usually, but I just got a new MacBook Pro, and I must not have installed the drivers for it or anything. But hey, we can just go like this. I'm good. You can hear me okay?
So we can. And Gautam, so first of all, meet Jim. Jim, meet Gautam. And
how are you, Jim? How have we never met before? This is a bit crazy.
I know. I just spent the last, I came home, I listened to a TED Talk that you did in 2012 or something, right? Is that was you? I definitely got it. I listened to it, and I know about your grandfather and your father, and setting up, these clinics to help people in your own medical career. So anyway, so I feel like I've met you now at this stage, but go ahead. But he's going to intro you properly.
That brought back some good flashback memories. It's funny. They always say when you do a TED Talk, always think of a specific audience in mind. And what I had for my specific audience there wasn't a health audience or the TED audience. That audience for my talk that I delivered was for my kid.
Oh, wow.
Lovely.
And that's kind of why I got a little touched up at the end there, is because
I was going to ask you that. You got a little teary-eyed.
Yeah, because you know what, they're going to grow up never knowing the lineage of service from our family. And the one video that will live on forever is when you give a TED Talk. And I felt like this was my opportunity to speak directly to my at that time, I think my kids were like 4, maybe 3.
Right.
So this is when they grow up, they'll see that talk and they'll get to know sort of the history and the lineage of how we got into healthcare.
Eugene and I are very, very modern men. We're emotional softies. We're.
So I was just, before we let you in, I'm drinking some local vermouth. So cheers to everyone.
Cheers.
That looks like, Jim, that looks like the glass in your logo in the shot.
I was thinking about it. I have a little kind of silver ball.
Nice. You can just see the lime on the edge.
So Gautam, I have never in 3 seasons, we're in the 3rd season, have read an actual bio, but I'm just so fascinated by yours, like the little brief. I'm going to actually read it. Okay. And then you fill in the blanks. So first of all, I love how you say pronunciation, because I like the Ga-Thumb Ga-Lotty. So that's one thing. But anyway, Dr. G is a polymath doctor who has built his reputation as a pioneering health innovation executive and advisor for several world-renowned organizations. He now spends his time as a storyteller, delivering keynote talks around the world, building out a new age media company, and taking a stab at a forthcoming book exploring the intersection of innovation and creativity. He has been a vocal advocate for using story as medicine and is re-exploring his childhood passion for spoken word poetry. His most recent claim to fame is being dubbed the Rick Rubin of podcasts. Well, I'm the Joe Rogan, and
listen, I think the idea, because you have to remember, Gautam, that we're fundamentally unproduced, so we actually have to read the bio on the show to make sure we've read it.
No,
we could have summarized it, but I think it was more fun. Am I hired as your agent to read your bio?
Done. You're just gonna go on tour with me. That's it. Yeah. Your only job.
He's got the radio voice.
But we gotta get you more animated on it.
So but talk to us about your. Well, sorry, Eugene. I would take you want to ask something first. Go ahead.
No.
Like storytelling in healthcare, right? So storytelling in healthcare. Is there kind of a, you talk about your lineage, your grandfather from, I'm not sure where part of India he was from, but he talked about setting up clinics during the Pakistani-Indian divide. So was storytelling part of Indian healthcare? Is that fundamental to it, or are they as rushed as the rest of the clinicians?
No, I don't think it was specifically part of Indian healthcare per se. I think it's just part of healthcare at its core. I mean, if you strip down healthcare to its bare bones, it's literally 90% of our diagnoses can simply come from a conversation between a doctor and a patient. That 10, 20, 30% that we spend on diagnostics and testing is therefore mostly supportive and confirmation of what we already deem to be the diagnosis and what the prognosis or treatment should be. So if you have unfortunately in today's world and sort of this dichotomy of the benefits and the pros and cons of technology, is we're stripping away the time required for that in-depth conversation. But at the end of the day, if I'm a doctor, you come in, well, I'm a doctor, but if you come in and are a patient of mine, if I were to sit there and ask the right questions, and more importantly, listen to what you're telling me, you're going to give me the story of your illness. And what's even more important is I got really inspired by, there's this poster of, have you guys heard of Tim Urban?
No,
He writes
I
this
haven't.
blog. He writes this really famous blog called Wait But Why. And if you ever get a chance, go check it out. But he has this poster that he's created. And he talks about life in weeks. And every box on the poster is a week of your life, all the way to a 90-year life. And I looked at that poster and I was like, well, first of all, it was depressing because I was like, holy shit, like how much little time I have left based on it if I fill in every box.
And how does that picture change during COVID, where everything is like, I don't even know if it's compressed or expanded or.
I have no idea.
Like we did 3 seasons. We did 3 seasons, and I
said the word. I said the word. But sorry, I took you off the track as far as squeezing. He's going to get it. He's going to get it.
No, but while he's getting that, I can't get to the poster.
It makeshift.
The poster. Oh yeah, it's like that. It's like a graph paper, but every one of those little boxes is like a week of your life. And so when I looked at that, I said, listen, healthcare, the way we innovate in healthcare is around little points in time over our life, right? That's why we call it point of care. And we tend to create innovations around points in time. And that will be heavy weighted towards when you're young and first born and your younger years. And then you get sporadic check-ins. Then in the middle of your life, you tend to have a little bit more check-ins and frequent check-ins. And at the end of your life, you have a lot of check-ins. But in between that is basically missed opportunity for health. And so what I always like to say is that health is not a point in time, but a story over time. And if you spend enough time with the patient and listen to their story, you can actually heal much better than any form of medication can. And it's sort of related to one of my favorite quotes from William Osler Williams, or Sir William Osler. He said, the role of the doctor is to occupy the patient long enough until the patient heals themselves.
Yep.
Right. I heard some, like my, my father-in-law, who was a fantastic pediatric consultant out of Italy. And he used to talk to us, and he would say to us when we had our first kids that the parent was the primary doctor, that the parent was the primary clinician. And the reason the parent was the primary clinician was because the child couldn't speak yet. And so the parent had to tell the child's story. That's how he used to think about it, that they had to tell the story of the child.
Think about, you mentioned story is medicine, right? But food is medicine, right? So, and it's the parents that set the example for the kids, right? What's eaten in the house. Do you read the stories at night to your kids, or you leave them alone, right? Like, so a lot of that is still tied. And to your point, like a lot of the common sense, right? And backed up by diagnostics and tools and things that the docs just now are entrenched in.
Yeah, but the challenge to that, right? Like they talk about this, like, okay, all the data flowing in, and that might, potentially replace in-person interactions. But the data is a story, right? Like, so like when I think, like, with my company, with my product, Health Beacon, just the time at night that a patient records when they took their injection, through our device. So just that time at night. And I have to do it for a family member. It tells a huge story. So for example, it's after dinner, the way my wife might dispose of the injection versus I would, for a child, it, might be differently. So it tells us like the story, when we go on vacation, it doesn't go into the box anymore, it's recorded somewhere else. So this like little story that if you walk through someone's house and you look at their house, there's a story in their house. There's kind of stories everywhere, right?
Can I tell a bad story?
We don't focus.
Yeah, bad story, please.
It's hard to quantify that. Sorry, what was that? The backstory?
No, I just remember as we're talking about the stories, I remember when I was living in Amsterdam, I remember going to like a quantified self meetup. This was back in the day. Right. And there was one guy was presenting the story of his poop. And this is like to track kind of his gut health, right? So, I mean, it was literally, he brought in like printed posters of daily, and I think even 3 times a day poop, and comparing colors and how he felt as far as the gut. So, and it told the story. I don't remember what the story was, but.
They say a picture tells 1,000 words. So I guess
right.
That's the same thing.
Certainly.
So Gautam, I remember, back when we met at XMed, when, conferencing was a thing, actually in person. And you sort of like, planted some seeds around, Jim and I joke around. We have a partnership with Spotify and Amazon, and we just post. But you actually literally have a partnership with Spotify. And I love the curation of it. I got to listen, I guess this was maybe a month and a half ago-ish or whatever, to just like a little sample, and I was just enamored. So maybe take us through, like, I know you're a storyteller, but like, how did you get to this, and why Spotify, and et cetera?
Yeah, so I mean, we went through. So what you're referring to is sort of a new media company called WellPlayed, which actually stemmed from a challenge from Spotify directly. So one of the executives over at Spotify, who was recently at that time over at Spotify, and this is before they announced going into podcasts. So it was some time ago, approached Jordan, Shlain, and myself, and basically said, "Hey, you guys are interesting guys. You're well connected. You're creative. You understand healthcare. You're both doctors. What if we were to put a challenge in front of you?" And that was to think about what a health and wellness media channel would look like in the context of Spotify. And nothing more than that. And so we were sort of taken aback a little bit. And, I had produced my own podcast. I had a podcast back in 2015, 2016 called That's Unusual. So I've gone through the whole thing. I've done, I understand the production element of things. I understand where it's been in the past, where it's going somewhat in the future, whatever we can predict. But we didn't know, we'd never looked at it from a market opportunity standpoint. And what Jordan and I quickly discovered was the voice of healthcare was very much outdated, right? If you tried to look up like who really owns the younger voice of healthcare that's with a shifting environment, meaning like sort of, I don't want to say that millennial generation, but let's say, sub 50, sub 55 population, right? Anything before that, we're still referring to things like WebMD, Medscape, Discovery Health Channel, things like that. Maybe Food Network has been a little bit more, a forward thinking in some of their programming, but even still, not the health angle of it or the well-being angle. It's more of the entertainment piece.
I don't know. I get my news on TikTok, health news, TikTok all the way.
What could go wrong there?
Yeah, like I'm all Joe Rogan.
So it's so we came back and we saw an opportunity, and they started introducing us to a lot of the celebrities within the Spotify network, but we quickly learned working and waiting for celebrities is a lose situation. So we ended up developing our own original content. So we like to think of ourselves as kind of like the HBO of podcasts. Where we're not trying to be a network play. I know you guys just recently had Dan Kendall, who's doing a phenomenal job with your show and the entire health podcast network, which is fantastic. So we're different. We're strictly focusing on original plays that are.
And what's the name again? Sorry, what was the name again? So
it's called WellPlayed, and you can find it at WellPlayed.Health.
Okay, great.
Dude, I was just checking it out. I like, as far as your advisors, I mean, obviously, I kind of figured Daniel Kraft, but like Jack, Kreindler, Rasu, Shafi, I see Mark Hyman, John Brownstein, Riccardo, Sabatini. I haven't spoken to him in a while. Parker. I mean, amazing crew of advisors, like amazing.
Yeah, I mean, they've been very supportive from the very beginning. I mean, now we're sort of tapping into a set of advisors, a part of the Art for Good program of Hatch, which is mostly focusing on some of the non-healthcare but creative elements of things. So looking at how to do sound production and sound engineering and musical scores and effective storytelling from film producers. So we're tapping into that angle of advisors right now. But these guys have been extremely supportive in terms of the network at play, in terms of WellPlayed. But we're about to release our first original show called Superhumans, and we're targeting a release before the end of the year.
And can you talk about the concept? What's a superhuman?
Yeah, so Superhumans, I mean, very simply stated, is it's a storytelling podcast where we believe that story can serve as a form of healing or as a form of medicine. And so what we do is we've got our own signature methodology in terms of how we capture story. So we'll tend to do, they're not interview-based podcasts.
Right.
Think of it as a authentic first-person storytelling, as like the Moth, if you're familiar with the Moth. The
Okay.
Moth meets Ted, where it's highly produced in terms of the sound quality and the engineering around it.
It's kind of like the Reed Hoffman. What's the Reed Hoffman one that he's doing?
Master
That's kind of
scale.
yeah. Is it kind of that or not that?
No, I mean, this is more about like, I'll give you some examples of our first season, right? So we have someone like Mark Brand, who's our opening pilot episode. You know, he runs sort of a culinary empire out of Vancouver in Canada, and his entire mission is essentially to create upward mobility against those who are incarcerated, those who have, you know, been in jail, or those who are homeless, or those who have an addiction, and he only hires those individuals to create upward mobility within his restaurants.
Lovely.
But he himself was homeless and struggling with addiction, and so what we do is we zoom in into sort of a micro story, and he tells this very specific story about his struggle with addiction when he was going through Stanford. And it's very,
Wow.
very powerful. We have another one where someone...
Jim, I listened to like less than 3 minutes of it, and I was like, when is all this coming out? I was like immediately like addicted. And I like your comparison of like the Moth, where it's like a story is really told, right?
Right.
Yeah, and we've got a signature methodology to get our storytellers in sort of a flow state. We go through this whole regimen. We actually spend about anywhere between 3 and 5 hours with them. So it's a big commitment, but the shows are only between 15 and 30 minutes long. So
okay,
how we sort of condense that down. But other examples we have.
Before you go on to the other examples, I'm sorry, how the hell do you do that? Because like, if you even ask me to do it from our 35-40 minute, I'll be like, I don't know. Right? I mean, I guess I summarized like a couple of points, but like from hours and hours of just amazing people talking to you, like nailing it down to 15 minutes, it's crazy.
Yeah, we have a process, and what we sort of a series of what we call imperfect drafts. And the imperfect drafts is generally start with a raw file, and then what we do is we break them out. And I'm sorry giving our methodology a little bit, but it's hard to replicate. But you take the raw audio content, and then you break them up into clusters, and then you start looking for signs of flow state, depending on where we think that there's a universal truth that can then our audience can then relate to. So we're always looking for that universal truth, that regardless of whether he was addicted to alcohol. Even though I've never been addicted to alcohol, there's still a universal truth that I can relate to, for example. And then we go through a series of steps. We take it from clusters into identifying what the narrative story arc is. Then we sort of mixtape it and break it down even smaller. Then once we do that, we do some micro edits around specific phrases of extraneous content that we want to bring in that are supportive of the story. Like sometimes there's a comment made 2 hours later that we think is relevant here, and we'll bring that back in. Then we do what we call a punctuation round. And the punctuation round is being very specific to the, not just the ums, ahs, things like that, which are actually we keep in a lot of our shows, but more about spacing, right? So if you're writing, for example, a book, you put periods, commas, semicolons. So we like to think of that from an audio engineering standpoint. You know, silence actually is very powerful. And so we use silence very intentionally in terms of our audio engineering. Then we go into sound. And we start baking in, we have original music scores that we partner with from musical composers that we're putting behind every episode. And eventually we're hoping to partner, for example, with the Juilliard School of Music and you know, incorporate, for example, you know, musicians who have disabilities and help them, for example. So there's a process, and then so
basically, I'm sorry. Basically, like mine and yours, Jim. It pretty much mirrors our process.
It is. Yeah,
it's kind of a process. Like,
it is overly produced.
Yeah, like I stay sober until 7, then I have a drink with Eugene. But okay, so wait, I know Eugene went. So are you like so you use in your podcast that I was listening to, this health artist, right? The health artist. I love this idea. Do you still use that?
I do not, but I probably should. I still think of myself as kind of a health artist.
Because I think of that because when you said that actually to me earlier through your TED Talk, I was like, that's what I am. I'm a health artist. I think Eugene's a health artist. So you know, we come at it from like I've been in healthcare forever, and I've created companies, and I've sat there and implemented programs for governments and insurance companies, and anything, I've given it a go. I've given it a go. And but when I walk in a room and I have a room of clinicians, and I have a room of nurses, and I have maybe some product designers, and I bring it together, and they're all confused and they don't know where to go. I'm like that, like kind of, like on the show, and like they're redoing the house for $1,000 or something. Like, how do you put the stuff here?
I just love that you promoted me to a health artist. Thank you. I feel honored.
I think you're a health. Yeah, like no, because that's what it is. And it's funny. I get stood down by all the time by, the classic clinician, and then until I got to a certain age, where probably I count clinicians within the Irish community as my best friends, and they love because we talk on a peer level. And a lot of people don't talk on peer levels with very influential clinicians. So because they kind of want what I have, and obviously I want their expertise and their knowledge of what's happening. So it's an even exchange a little bit, it's an even exchange of but I never knew it. Now I know it's a health artist.
You are a health artist. You are a true health artist. The challenge with it is that people have a hard time grasping that word artist, right? They're like, oh, well,
right.
First of all, artistry is all experimental, and healthcare is nothing but, right? Like, it's supposed to be grounded in evidence and science, but at the end of the day, we call it a practice for a reason, right? I mean, a lot of what we do is, what we believe to be true today, changes its truth down the road as a result from more research or more science. From my standpoint, the way we define innovation, and I've spent my career doing innovation work, is innovation is very simply the art of making things better by making better things. That's it. Innovation is the art of making things better by making better things. And it truly is that can be a massive topic, right? Through behavior, technology, through business model processes. It really is an art form, and how you craft it all together to make something of value.
Did Milind take parts of that? And because I've been quoting Milind on, clarity of innovation. So he says it's like, do things better or do better things. And, the reality is you need both, right? But like looking at innovation in corporations is, people trying to optimize the process, right? Or create new processes and products. So I think he took some of that from you, Gautam.
Yeah.
I'm gonna.
No, that's great. No, it's not. It's not. I'm kidding. I'm probably not the only person thinking about this.
But you also talked about.
Go ahead.
You talked about kind of medical schools kind of engineering out creativity, right? Like kind of like, or something, you had some kind of comment like that.
Well, I think it's better now. When I went to med school, it sucked out every ounce of creativity from me. I was such a creative guy going into it. I used to do slam poetry. I would sneak out on Wednesday nights in DC and go to this place called Black Cat. And I never tell my friends because I was embarrassed, but I was a creative writing major in college. And an English lit major, and with a concentration in poetry. And when you're pre-med, that's not something you really talk about back in the mid-90s, right? So I'd be the guy who literally would be in my breaks writing poetry, slam poetry, and going up on stage and performing and competing on stage with them. But also I'd have like the industry standard magazine tucked away in my biochemistry book. Because I was embarrassed because healthcare and business just was not something talked about together at that time.
You were actually writing on little notes inside those books, your innovation book, which actually I'd like to loop back in because I love how you defined it. And what are you actually writing a book on?
Yeah, so there's a couple of working titles for the book, but the premise of it is essentially how to think like an innovator. And how to cultivate better ideas. So this notion, I'm sort of going against the grain of the conventional thinking of it's not the idea that matters, it's the execution that matters, right? We've heard that probably over and over again.
Sure.
But the reality is executing on a bad idea is a bad idea itself. And most organizations, most organizations just aren't trained to come up with good ideas. And every single meeting that you're in, right? You're going into a meeting for one of two reasons. Either it's to share information with your teams or to get information, or it's to solve a problem. And if you're solving a problem, it's all about ideation. And so when if I'm a leader and I go into the room and I'm basically saying, all right, we're going to have to solve this problem, I'm basically confined to whatever ideas are generated by the people around that table. The false assumption that I have running is that these people know how to come up with good ideas.
Right.
That is completely false. And
Yeah,
so the book is essentially designed to give people the techniques of being able to cultivate better ideas for the organization and then apply that to innovation practices.
So, I mean, it seems like already a couple of years, which is great. Exited out a big company, and there's idea management, which I was never a believer on, and there's open innovation, which then absolutely most of the ideas, not necessarily all, but come outside of the four walls, and then bringing that in. So where do you kind of stand on idea management, open innovation? Is there something between, like, and without giving away your book, which I
I like to think of the book as the prequel to like the tipping point, or the prequel to I'm just looking at my books over up here. It's before you start executing an idea. What do you do before you start executing an idea, right? Open innovation is a process in terms of how do you essentially collaborate, openly collaborate to come up with the best ideas possible. So this is not, trying to say that, there's one innovation practice better than the other. No. This is about saying, I mean, I can sort of walk you through some of the steps. I don't have a name for the framework yet. But at the end of the day, it's
let's brainstorm ideas around the name for the framework.
Well,
let's hear the framework.
It's based on the concept of deliberate practice. So you guys familiar with Anders Ericsson?
Yeah.
So Anders Ericsson came up with or sort of coined the terminology of deliberate practice. It was used by Malcolm Gladwell. He took one piece of it and talked about 10,000 hour rule. My framework is built around the process of what I call deliberate creativity. And it's basically the antithesis of not leaving your ideas to chance, but being deliberate around the process of how you actually generate an idea. And I walk through techniques and practices that I specifically use, and I had my team specifically use, and what I've advised other organizations to use to generate some of the best ideas for their clients or for themselves. And sort of it's this iterative process to eventually come out with, elevating your idea from when you first conceived it to something that comes out better. So I don't touch the execution piece of it. There's plenty written about that.
I think of the ideas like like Eugene, like I'm constantly, within my own organization, advancing concepts. And I actually think, like, when I think about bringing a new concept to the world or hearing someone else's concept and realizing that they maybe just got something, or that it's worth a further thought or worth a further exploration. Yeah. And I immediately go into kind of like a patriarchal mode. Like I almost go into like a protect it, because I know, that as soon as something comes in, it's kind of hostile almost immediately. Like it's like a new idea, it's like almost like the environment. So like I'm immediately checking like who could kill this idea. It's like a young baby, like who's gonna, like, I have to protect this now. That's a good idea, because the ideas, some of the best ideas get killed immediately. They're immediately killed. But they're not formed. You can't articulate them. You can't communicate them. It's not obvious to everyone in the room. Maybe it wasn't so well explained. Maybe it was a half an idea, so I immediately move in. Okay, that's good. Okay, and I go into kind of a protection mode. I'm like, okay, let's bring it out of the room now. Like I run it out of the room. Like leave the room with the idea.
You mentioned the half-baked idea. I mean, this is essentially what it is, taking a half-baked idea and make it a fully-fledged, fully baked idea, right? So, I mean, right. You guys have probably, Eugene, especially you've probably been in a workshop scenario where, I've been called in to facilitate and moderate a number of workshops for a number of large life sciences companies. And for the most part, they're complete failures. They're designed to essentially create the perception of taking action around solving a problem utilizing collective leadership. And I've rarely seen any, there are exceptions, but I've rarely seen anything significant coming out of those workshop retreats. And I've led them. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that they come in and say, oh, well, we don't want to tell everyone participating what the problem is, what we're solving for. Wait till we get there. Then we'll do like a session in the morning. And then we'll have a, ideation session in the afternoon. Then the next day
it's a feel good, have the employees feel good that they're ideating. I always joked around. It's like, how many freaking workshops you can have on new business models where the whole pharma industry is stuck with the existing business model. Like, just because you have 2,700 workshops on new business models, how are you going to get that off the ground? What are you going to build? Who are the people?
Isn't there I think the secret here, though, there's a bit of a flaw in this whole thing, which is that, like, okay, so you did slam poetry while you were in school, right? Like, so you did poetry. So like, just take the best poet. You don't go to the doctor to get poetry. Like, if people inside these companies are, generally executing on a management challenge that's pretty well structured, and so their job is to manage something or bring it to the next stage or monitor, and they're usually incredibly intelligent, incredibly talented in their own ways. But idea generation is not what they're, so, why would you go to them? Like, you don't go to a non-poet for poetry, you go to the poet. And so there's certain people that can generate ideas. Isn't there like this? Now that might be because they're fundamentally creative. They have lack of constraints, so they can see angles, experience, whatever it is.
Well, and the hurdle that I'm up against is that most people don't think they have bad ideas, right? I mean, ask anybody. Oh, my ideas are great, right? Like, they're fantastic. Like, I don't have an idea issue.
I agree.
Hold on a sec. I'll show you a copy of the book of the.
Our actual podcast listeners will be a lot jealous, but they're gonna have to come and watch the YouTube.
Oh, it's backwards.
Oh, nice.
Oh, you
deliberate creativity.
That's the book cover.
You already deliberately have a cover?
Oh yeah. I've got a publisher. I've got a cover. I'm most of my way through. I've just been sidetracked a little bit because of launching WellPlayed and Superhumans. But
I want to be you when I grow up, Gautam. So I kind of have this with Jim. We have the meticulously unproduced show. I have a very meticulously unproduced book.
I feel sorry for you. If I'm what you're aspiring to, man. No way, man.
So
getting okay. Oh, C19.
It's all good. I was just looking at the time because we're doing this a little bit different time wise, but I'm the I can do this for a couple more hours, honestly.
This is great. I feel like I'm actually on a recorded podcast. I'm just having a conversation with you guys. Great.
That's the feeling.
I went back. I've been thinking some of your shows, which is great.
Oh yeah, awesome.
Yeah, they're okay. They're okay. They're awesome.
No, well, I traditionally listen to a lot of storytelling podcasts just because that's the world I'm living in right now.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it was great. I haven't listened to many of the digital health conversations that are happening. I mean, I've been working with Click and producing some of their articles and working on their behalf for some things. Other than that, usually we get it from being at conferences and
right, exactly.
But what is it?
Interaction.
Like, what is the digital? It's like we got Dan, right? We got Lisa Suennen doing tectonics. We got Bolty Boy and Health 2.00, right?
Health
what are the
Excel,
other ones?
Don't forget. Don't forget about Health Excel podcast. Come on, Marty would be upset.
Yes, of course. That was coming to that Health Excel podcast. And who I mean, is there? Am I missing a whole universe of them? I mean, I've seen there's a lot of TED, like the TED Talks, they do a lot of that stuff. That's not podcast though. There's a lot of health stuff. Tons of health
I think it's also getting to, I think what Dan mentioned last time, it's micro podcasting, right? Like very specific niche topics that are, not necessarily digital health anymore. It's just health, right? Like, you got so many people and to Gautam's point, a lot of them are, maybe not as fun as ours just because we're drinking and talking, but they're interviews, they're guests, and a host, and to get to a specific topic, very structured generally. All right.
Like us.
Yeah. I mean, we knew exactly,
I love how you guys call it the unproduced podcast. Let's just call it.
That was the best thing that, honestly, Emmy's contribution to this podcast is probably the most important. Yeah. Emmy is Jim's wife.
She's lived with an unproduced company builder for a lot of years. Yeah.
An unproduced human being.
Poor thing. Poor thing.
Oh man. So I'm honestly like I don't know, any parting wise words or any interesting stories. I know one actually. Can I just say? And I hope it's the same background where you and I, when we had like a FaceTime call or whatever, we started talking about books, and I found it's a fascinating fact, and just goes to show wonderful Esther Dyson's kind of heart. So maybe you can tell that little story about
what's
the book.
behind me?
Yeah.
This, right there?
Yeah.
That is so in 2004, you know how you have your childhood room in your parents' house? So my parents'
Right.
house had a house fire, and somehow it started right outside my bedroom with a short-circuited electrical box. So all of my childhood books, and I'm an avid book collector. I'm literally sitting in a library in my home. Like I love reading. That's all I do. And I lost my entire collection of books. I mean, not to mention like my baseball cards, my coin collection, my comic books, like everything from childhood was gone.
Right.
And so we were at a retreat together in, I want to say it was in California, or maybe it was Rhode Island too. But so Esther and I were just chatting, and she's like, listen, I'm on the road 300 days of the year. And I've got a massive book collection in my apartment in New York. And at that time I was living in New York. And she's like, well, why don't you swing by and pick up, I'll give you my entire library. So this wall of my library is a combination of Esther Dyson's and her father, Freeman Dyson, who recently passed away, a collection of books, which is just the most incredible.
Amazing.
I mean, she is one, like you'd think that her, you know, given her journalism background, that she would have a lot of things around, you know, news and science and technology. But I got to say, I mean, most of what's on her wall, I mean, there's a scattering of that, but most of it is actually fiction. Most of it is you know, so she's a very well-versed and well-read individual.
Excellent.
Well, on that note, you know, just I want to, you know, aside from telling our viewers and listeners to kind of hit that subscribe button, I'm still aiming for the Joe Rogan thing. I just keep saying it, but also check out, you know, Gautam and team's WellPlayed.Health. I'm personally super excited to actually start following, adding that in on Spotify. Like, looking forward to it. So it was a pleasure, man.
Excellent.
This is great. Thanks for having me.